training, and welcome to another episode of Dog Talk. Today, I want to talk about allergies in dogs. So, obviously, I'm not a veterinarian, I'm a dog trainer, but I've seen a lot with my own dogs, and I've seen how recommendations that veterinarians give my clients have certainly changed over the years. And it's been kind of interesting to see, I'm not sure why, but interesting to see what they have changed about their recommendations. And I've also a good number of my own experiences. And I have some opinions on what I think is the best way of approaching it and hopefully save you some money in the process of figuring it out. Because one of the things that vets these days seem to want to do is just always go straight to allergy shots, which they can sell you, and you have to come back and you do them every month, and they work. It's not that they don't, but there are other things you can try that vets used to recommend in the past that absolutely work, and they are cheaper for you. They cost you less money, and they may be very successful in the long run. And there's also some things. There's one particular thing I will get to that has never really made sense to me, and it really is a weird piece of advice. But we'll talk about it. So allergies in dogs are no different than allergies in people, essentially. I mean, or the immune system starts fighting itself on something, and they can develop over time for all kinds of reasons. This is exactly the same as with us. Why do we get an allergy? When you get older, get allergies. You live in an environment with certain allergens. After a while, the system reacts towards them. Things you didn't have a problem before, now you do. There's all that's exactly the same biologically as it is with a person. So there's really no difference in how this happens and why this happens. And I'm not an expert as to why it happens anyway. So I want to talk more about how to approach allergies when you see them first and see what you can try. And you'll know pretty quickly if it works. It's not that you doctor around there for a long time. But there are some things to do that make sense before you embark on a monthly allergy shot operation, which will cost you a pretty penny. And it may have come down to that, but there are some things that you can try first. So, the first thing with allergies is there's two types that you generally have to worry about. There's environmental based allergies, and then there's food allergies. Now, one thing that is the one that baffles me the most is when you go to a veterinarian with your dog and you say my dog has allergies and you think it's a food allergy, they will say, well, just switch to food, try something else. Well, what? I don't know what my dog is allergic to. So what else would I be trying at this point without any further information? What am I switching to? Right? So that baffles me. It's just like try another food. Which one? There's so many. So if I don't know what my dog's allergic to, I can't really make an educated adjustment based on what I need to avoid and get out of his diet or her diet. And sometimes what a dog could be allergic to can be can make it quite difficult to actually find a food that doesn't contain this ingredient. So, for example, I have a client right now, and he is on a combination of food that they found, but it's not the greatest, and they're very interested in exploring other options because what they're doing is food-wise expensive, and it's not the greatest in terms of nutrition. It avoids the allergens for sure, but they'd like to do better. So they asked me if it could help, and I'm happy to. So I've been looking. But one of the things, or two of the things the dog's allergic to, which makes this tricky with good foods, he's allergic to pumpkin and flaxseed. And those are two high quality ingredients, and they are, that you find in a lot of great foods. So finding good food that doesn't contain them is tricky. I've been looking for a while, I'm still looking. And so unless you actually know, you can't really adjust. And they did what I'm going to talk about next. They did the right thing. They did an allergy test, and that is really the only way of figuring out what you're allergic to. So as I said, there's environmental allergies and there's food allergies. So environmental, it could be a fungus, it could be grasses, it could be certain soils, it could be things that you will just find in your garden, certain plants. And if it's as simple as a plant you could remove, and then you have a yard that's free of the allergen, fantastic. But my dog Sylvester used to have an allergy to a certain fungus type. And it's a fungus type that you will find anywhere in grasses, in yards. You can't get rid of them. They're just out there. I mean, certain funguses just exist in the environment and you can't eradicate them easily. In a clean room, but not in a yard. So when it comes to environmental allergies, there is often no other remedy than taking some sort of medication approach or some sort of blocking approach to deal with the allergy because you will literally have no other options. You cannot get this out of the dog's environment sometimes. If you can, great, but oftentimes with environmental allergies, you will not be able to. That is very different with food allergies. With food allergies, you are able to. It's just a matter, are you willing to go as far as it takes? Will you actually be able to figure it out? But that would be ultimately the best way of dealing with a food allergy. So, another example. Before I was raw feeding, I cooked for my dogs and I had a custom breed specific diet. And now I think I talked about this in the food podcast. But I had a very specific diet that's customized for German Shepherds. And the nutritional profile is perfect. You can't feed a German Shepherd a better version of any food. That's what they should be eating, based on the region they're from and the types of vitamins and proteins and minerals and whatever. It was really the right thing to feed. But Sylvester, after a while, developed an allergy to one of the ingredients in that food. And what he developed an allergy to was wheat. And wheat was a not unsubstantial part of the diet. It wasn't the main thing, but it was a good chunk of wheat in there in terms of whole grain bread in this case. And for fitting that wasn't really that easy as an option as long as I wanted to feed this diet. So I had to look at this a little bit more closely, and this is maybe where it gets interesting, because it was a wheat allergy. So when you have a wheat allergy, what do you actually have an allergy towards? Is it all wheats, or is it just the most standard type wheat that we use today? And it's the latter. Right? So most people and most animals who have a wheat allergy have an allergy to the current predominant wheat type. And that's usually the flour, the wheat flour that's being used to produce the bread and the ingredients. And the wheat flour we use today that you buy in a supermarket, the all-purpose flour, whatever kind of wheat flour you buy in the big packages, is usually one of the wheats that the food companies created 15, 20 years ago. It's kind of an artificial wheat combination or some genetically modified wheat types, very common. It's like nothing wrong with it per se, but that's the wheat we're using. And if you have an allergy towards that, that doesn't mean that you are allergic to all types of wheat. So there is more traditional wheat types or wheat flour types that are wheat, you would use them like any other wheat, you can buy flour with it, that you probably don't have an allergy to because they're not as common and they're more the old type of wheat flours and types that people used to use 50, even 100 years ago. And this would be, for example, the most common one you can go buy bread at the supermarket these days with is spelt flour. Spelt flour is a wheat flour. Emmer flour is another one. It's a little harder to find. Kamut flour, another one. Kamut flour is a little bit of a nutty taste. If you're not want a nutty taste, then that's out. But emmer flour and spelt flour, you use it like regular wheat flour, and you won't really notice a difference if you start baking your own things. So the solution in this case for me was, well, he's allergic to wheat. Let's try a different wheat type. And I went with spelt, easier to get, cheaper than the emmer and kamut. They cost more. So I started baking my own bread before I found I can actually buy some spelt bread at Sprouts. Made it easier for me there. But I started baking my own bread for a while with spelt flour. Problem solved. Because that's what the allergy was about. It was allergic to traditional wheat flour products. Spelt flour, no reaction. So he could get his wheat in his diet and didn't have any further problems. So identifying the allergen specifically was a key to figuring this out. Because other dog foods, or kibble foods or whatever, would not have had that particular wheat flour type. They would all go, if it's wheat, it's the traditional wheat. It's normal wheat that everybody uses, the most common one. So knowing what that's about is super helpful in really eliminating targeted components And when you cook your food or if you feed raw food, it's obviously very easy to supplement or take it out. If you feed commercial foods, that's impossible. But it's in there. You can't separate that out. But it all started with an allergy test. And on the environmental side of the allergy test, when you ask for that, the vets will usually run it. They won't give you much objection if you're willing to pay for it. They'll tell you, oh, it'll cost you a couple of $100 and say, I don't care. I need to know what my dog's allergic to. And they will say, well, why don't you just give them medication or this and that because you probably can't eliminate it. And that is true with the environmental allergies. You probably cannot eliminate it. But I think that allergy cost me $150 one time. And I wanted to know if I can. So on the environmental side, it was stat, and it was a fungus and the grass, a grass type and a fungus type. I didn't have the grass, but the fungus is just everywhere. There's no way to avoid that. But I wanted to know. If you don't want to know and just give an antihistamine or give allergy shots or so, I mean, you can take that. But that's certainly an option, but you will have to keep doing that. No? And to see if you can do something about it, to me, is a smart approach. If you can. I understand not everybody can just spend $150 an allergy test. I get that. But if you can, that's a way to really know, can I do something about this or can I not? On the environmental side of the allergies. But this was a food element. So the food allergy test, all the vets I've met, not all, but most of the vets I met, they want to talk you out of it. They want to say, oh, they're not reliable enough, they're not good enough, the data doesn't work that well. And that has not been my experience at all. So I insisted with my vet at the time, no, I want to run it. I was another $150 in this case, but it's a one-time expense. You don't do this like forever. You do it one time and then you know. So I insisted, I want to know, I'll pay the $150 or whatever it was, and I want to know what the allergies are. And I got the result back, and it was wheat, and it was flax, the other thing. Flax wasn't in his diet. It's a high-quality ingredient in many commercial foods, but it wasn't in his custom diet. He got his omega-3s from other sources. So that allergy test showed me it was a wheat allergy. I changed out the wheat type in this case. I didn't even get rid of the wheat. I just changed the wheat type because they test for the regular wheat flour again. And problem solved. I would have never been able to do that without the allergy test. And I also went to a canine dermatologist at one point because I kept hearing, well, these allergy tests are not as accurate. Is there better versions? I wanted just to talk to someone about it. And they said, yeah, we do the environmental ones, but the food ones we're not convinced of. So they all keep saying that. And that really has not been what I experienced when I tested and then targeted it and it worked out. So I'm not sure where that's coming from. I'm sure there is some reason why they feel this way. I'm not disputing that there may be some quality problems with the older tests. But now there is also something called NutriScan. And that is from Hemopet. That is Dr. Gene Dodd's vet organization. It's here in Southern California in Garden Grove. But you can buy it wherever you are in America. So NutriScan is a saliva-based allergen test for food. And it is very good. And it is very accurate and very easy to do unless your dog doesn't have a lot of saliva, which some dogs, we had some interesting dogs that didn't produce saliva enough to actually swab it, and we had to take them in to do it at Hemopet itself, and then they took care of it. But NutriScan is a good test, and it gives you a way to really understand what the food allergens are. And then you have a baseline. Then I know, okay, my dog's allergic to this type of protein, or maybe this type of wheat, or this type of potato, or this type of ingredient, whatever. And then you can go and look really at the ingredients of bags and pick something that avoids all these problems and is still a good quality food. So now changing the food becomes something that's feasible. Without that information, I'll be poking around in the dark and just trying one food after the other. And my poor dogs will keep suffering with other allergies and outbreaks that I may cause. And then let's say he breaks out another food and I don't know that it may be a different allergen now that he's reacting to. Because I don't know what the actual problem is unless I test it. So I'm a big fan of allergy tests. It's a one-time expense, and if you can do it, I think it's the way to go. And I would start with the food one because that's the one where you can truly eliminate the ingredients Even if you feed commercial diet, you can, if you once you know, you can look and find something that you're comfortable with, most likely that will eliminate the allergen from your dog's food, and that will deal with the problem. And then on the environmental side, what the vets are saying there is a fair point. You probably can't address that. You probably can't eliminate it. I still wanted to know because maybe I could. In my case, I couldn't. Okay, but I don't regret doing it. At least I know. At least I know what the allergy actually was. And so that's understanding what the allergies are. So test. If it's feasible to you to test, test it. I will put a link to NutriScan in the show notes, and you can read up more and read it yourself. It's a good test. It's one way to go. And you do it at home. They just send you the kit, use a saliva swab, stick it in an envelope, ship it back. So it's not, you don't even have to go to a vet for that. You don't have to draw blood for that. So it's a very easy home test to do, and they will send you the results and discuss them with you if you have questions afterwards. So it's a very smooth process. So that's understanding what the allergies in your dogs are. So once we understand what they are, so what do we do about them? As I said with food, obviously eliminate the ingredient if possible. But if we can't, on the environmental side, or we have something we can't eliminate that. So what options are there? And my vet, back then when I had to deal with this, gave me a handout with which antihistamines to use on my dog based on their body weight, which I can try. And they're over the counter, they don't cost much. So like generic Zyrtex, generic Claritin, Benadryl, there's a couple of others. But they're basically the human antihistamines you buy at Sam's Club or Costco or online, Amazon, whatever, in big bottles, and they don't cost much at all. So like 200 pills, like $15. And once you know the ratio, you can try those. I have not heard from my clients in recent years that vets still suggest that. They always want to go straight to allergy shots. And when you're in a situation where you have to do something medically about it, the allergy shots have to be redone regularly, and they cost a lot of money. So now we're talking real big bucks over time. And trying a over-the-counter antihistamine may help and solve the problem. Because I had this with another dog of mine who developed an allergy, also environmental, another shepherd, and generic Zyrtec did it for me. So my Zyrtec is the one I use. I just went to the generic version. It's cheaper. Buy it at Costco or Sam's Club, depending on where I stop by, or sometimes Amazon. And it really is cheap. It doesn't cost much at all. It's a very easy thing to do. And with this information that I got from my vet 10, 15 years ago, still have it, how much of each antihistamine by pound of body weight to use, it's been a great approach. Another thing that my vet had told me back then is, well, antihistamines, everybody reacts different to them. If one doesn't work, try another. So it's really like Zyrtec doesn't work, we'll try Claritin. Claritin doesn't work, well, maybe try Benadryl. And Benadryl makes dogs drowsy, so it's usually not the first thing I try. Or it can make dogs drowsy, let's put it that way. It doesn't make all dogs drowsy, but some dogs are just so much energy, it doesn't affect them much in that regard. But Claritin and Zyrtex don't. So there's a couple of others. So if one doesn't work, try another. Just like you would with yourself. So if you had an allergy and that I would use antihistamines, that's what your doctor would tell you. Well, try this, try that. Here's a couple that are targeted towards your type of allergy you have. Well, try which one works best for you. If this doesn't work, try the next one. Because everybody reacts differently, and they are all slightly have differences. So that makes perfect sense, right? So it's basically the same approach that the human doctor will tell you to take for yourself. You can take for your dog and see if that will address it at a much lower price point. And that's the medical approach. It's an antihistamine. The allergy shots are antihistamines too. It's just a different way of administering them. And if that doesn't work, by all means, don't doctor around for too long with this, right? And you can talk to your vet about this too. You can run it by your vet. You should definitely check with your vet. I'm not a vet, so I'm not saying you should follow my advice over your vet's advice. But I'm giving you a couple of alternatives to try if you're so inclined. So I try over-the-counter antihistamines in the case of my dogs first. And if that doesn't work and we need allergy shots, by all means, we will do the allergy shots. It's not that we're going to deprive the dog of treatment. But in terms of costs, that can be a much cheaper way of managing that in a very responsible way, in a way vets generally allow or even recommended in the past. They make obviously no money of that whatsoever, so they probably prefer to administer their own treatment, which I totally get as well. And it's not that it's bad treatment at all. Again, they work fine. I mean, I know a lot of clients who went the allergy shot route and they just tell me how expensive it is and they wish they didn't have to, but it works. It's just, I've never had anybody who said it didn't work. So it's not that that's a bad approach. It is not. It's an effective approach. And if you prefer doing that, do that. But antihistamines over the counter can be the solution and it will cost you a lot less. But discuss that with your vet too. Maybe the allergy that your dog has could not be addressed with an over-the-counter antihistamine. If that's the case, well, they can tell you probably why. That wouldn't work. There's not all antihistamines work against all allergens, and it has something to do with blood types. And so there's some inclinations where you just know from the get-go, well, this one's not going to work, this one may work. So there's some data on what does what, and your veterinarian can advise you to that. Even though they may not recommend it themselves, if you ask them, they know these things can work on these things. It's not that they don't know this, right? So, and I will post the ratios that my vet gave me also in the show notes. And that's again, check with your vet. Don't just do that. But that's what I've been using for the last 15 years when I had to deal with an allergy, and it's worked for me great. And it's veterinary advice. I didn't make this up myself. So I don't have this weight usage chart that just popped into my head. So no, I got this from my vet. So it's, and again, if one doesn't work, try another. But that's an approach. So one other thing that we discovered through, more by accident, was with one of our shepherds, and he had these scabs on his lips, and that's an allergy response, something in the environment, not in his food, because we did an allergy test on him. But we found a product, it's called Zesty Paws Immunobites, I think it's. I'm going to post a link to that as well. We buy these on Amazon, and actually that is an immuno product to help immune support, and it's worked for him. So there's even some over-the-counter, it's a treat basically, full of omega-3s and fish oils and all kinds of good things, and the probiotics, and so that with our shepherd, absolutely got the allergies under control. This particular thing with his lips. So there are some commercial products. They're also worth trying. And just having a couple of alternatives and not, I have to do this, I can't do anything else, is probably good to know. There's a few things you can test out for maybe like a week, 2, 3, and see if that makes a difference. Once you have test results on the allergy test, before you resort to expensive solutions. If you have to go down this path, go down this path. Your pet needs to be taken care of. He needs to, obviously, or she needs to have this addressed. You can't let this go untreated. You have to deal with allergies because it becomes pretty nasty if you don't. It can become skin rashes and wounds and infections, and there's all kinds of things that can happen. This can go pretty far in a short amount of time. So a couple of months, you can be in a serious health problem if you don't address an allergy and your dog licks and scratches, and so you have to address it. It's not that you can just like ignore it. But these are a couple of options that used to be recommended by veterinarians all the time, and now they don't seem to be recommended as much anymore. And there's no money in it for them, so the money goes to someone else. It goes to the company who makes the antihistamine versus the vet giving you something only they can give you. So there's that. And they work, but they cost money. So here's a couple of alternatives that you can try for your own pets. Again, in the show notes, I will have these things listed out for you. Discuss them with your vet if you have any kind of questions or concerns. There's definitely a veterinary question. If you notice allergies, you should talk to your vet, and don't just doctor around on your own. You need their support to do an allergy test. So for the environmental allergy test, they will do a blood draw, send it to a lab. You get the results a couple of days later. So have your vet definitely involved in this process. I'm not saying you should do this instead of going to a vet. Absolutely not. You need your vet to help. But here's a couple of pieces of information that you can take into this conversation and discuss, is this an approach I can take on this allergy with my dog? What do you think of that? Why not? Why yes? So the more information you have before you go in, the more productive the conversation ultimately will be for your dog. Because you can find different solutions that may work better for you or better for your dog, or they're worth trying, or not even worth exploring based on what allergies you're dealing with. But the moment you test, you really know what you really need to go after. So start with a food allergy test. Nutri-Scan's a good one. There are other options. Your vet can run one. There's other things you can send it to the lab with a blood draw, certainly possible. But Nutri-Scan is an alternative with saliva you can do at home. And then blood draw for environmental allergies. Vet sends it to the lab. You get all the results. Then you know what you're dealing with. And then you can try antihistamines, over-the-counter products, or commercial products you can buy in stores for immunosupport. And if that doesn't work, you can do allergy shots, and your vet can advise you further from there what all is out there. There's all kinds of treatments. If it's gotten to the point of your dog having itches and rashes and skin infections, you may need steroids for a period of time to clear this up. You may need antibiotics for a period of time to deal with infection. I had this once. It can go pretty quickly, and then you have to just take the medication for a while to get it all cleaned up and get it to a stable baseline. But during this time, you would already start with whatever antihistamine or shot or whatever it is that you end up doing to eliminate the allergic reaction on top of that also. And then monitor it, see if it's working, and come to something that's financially doable for you, easy to do, your dog has no problem with, and it just works for everybody. So a couple of things on allergies for dogs that we personally do for our dogs, and it's all started with our vets giving you these options in the past, and now they apparently are no longer being offered. Always go straight to allergy shots. But yeah, I hope that gives you some entry point if you're noticing an allergy in your dog. Test it, try to address it, and find a solution that works. Sometimes it's tricky. Sometimes you have to try a few things before you find the right one. Even back then, I had to try a couple of different antihistamines. Just for a week and a half, I think. Started off with Claritin, didn't work that well in this particular case. And then I switched to Zyrtec, and that ended up being working. That was the solution for my dogs. So you have to try different ones if you try the antihistamine approach with over-the-counter pills. Okay, so that was a little shorter today. I hope that was helpful. My thoughts on allergies in dogs and how to tackle them. And see you next time. Bye.